Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. Wow, do I have an amazing guest for you today? And first of all, I want to extend and welcome a huge thank you to my guest, Sherrie Dunlevy. It is my honor and privilege to have you on today. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Janice, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
And I just want to hold up your book. It's a book that's the name of it, of course, is How Can I Help? And I just want to start out by saying thank you so much for writing this book and really sharing the depth of your story. You're a wife, a mom to two amazing boys, of course, one son in college and one son in heaven.
Right.
And when I read your book, I'm not going to lie, I got all choked up. Something that a mom and a family should not have to go through. But through your experience, and I always say the story behind the story, just really touched my heart. And I know that it's obviously touched others people's hearts as well. And this is really, excuse me, this is really a go-to guide for helping loved ones through life's difficulties. And it occurred to me as I was reading through it. And as you mentioned, of course, in your book, life happens.
Right.
And sometimes in very unexpected ways. And through your tragedy, in your family's tragedy, of course, you were able to get to a spot and were able to share your story that honors your family's journey.
Thank you. Yes, and it didn't happen overnight. It did not happen overnight at all. In fact, when my son Brandon died, I had a 3-year-old at home. And so it really did not happen until I was well into raising an independent young man. That was my first and foremost job, was to make sure the son that was living was getting my attention. And really, this was kind of like, how do I want to say, almost a full circle moment, because as my son was getting ready to leave for college, I realized that I was losing him also. So I was losing another son in a whole other way. So there was grief that all of a sudden returned. It brought back a lot of old wounds. And there was an incident that happened when I lost my first son, Brandon, through death. My husband and I lost some of our best friends.
Oh,
I happened to lose my best friend. I thought she was going to call and say, I've got a sitter for the kids. I'm on my way. I'll be there. And instead, what I heard was, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And so 6 years later, the phone rings and it was her, and she just wanted to pick up where we left off. You've been on my mind. I just thought I'd see what was going on, with no mention of the son's death or me being abandoned or how I was handling my grief or how I was moving through it. And so I always say, thank goodness there were many years that went by, because the anger and the hurt had transformed into curiosity of what was that about. And so that curiosity stewed for many years. And I kept thinking, why would people, when you need them the most, drop out of your life? This is when you need them the most. And so I thought about that question for a lot of years. And then I started talking to other people. I went back to work. I became a radio talk show host, and I started finding that people, didn't matter whether you were going through a divorce or whether you lost your job, whether you lost your independence, whether you had to give up your job in order to take care of someone at home, whether you had a diagnosis of cancer, people drop out of your lives. Sometimes family members do. They just don't show up for you. And so I kept looking for a book. I would go on Amazon. I would go to Google things. I would walk into a physical bookstore and look for this. And every time I would walk away, I would hear this voice or feel this voice or this knowing that said, if you want this to be, you need to be the one to write it. And so I fought that for a couple of years. So this took many, many years. It was a phone call. It was the abandonment and the phone call that struck the curiosity and asked the question. Then it was the years of talking to people. And then it was finally the grief of losing my second son to college that I decided, okay, I'm going to write this book. And then it was like, well, I'm not the expert. But I have a background. I was a television news reporter and I knew how to interview people. And so I thought, you know what, this isn't about the people with the PhDs and the letters after their name, although they are very helpful in this situation. But I want to talk to the people who have walked through this exact same scenario and have gotten to the other side. And I want to ask them, what did your friends and family do? Because I want the answers. And I want this to be for those people who are on the fence of, do I step out and do something or do I not? Am I going to say the right thing or am I not? I'm afraid. This scares me. But this relationship means something to me because it's my opinion, it's better to step out awkwardly and in love than to retreat in fear and sever the relationship, because that's exactly what's going to happen. So it was quite a journey for me, but the intention of this book is not to condemn or ridicule people for not stepping out. It's to provide tools, very easy tools, something that calls to you that you say, I can do that, and to simplify it, because if these relationships are important to you, you need to step out in love.
Thank you so much for sharing that, the backdrop to your story. I do want to point out, though, as you mentioned, you may not be an expert with the letters after your name, but Sherrie, you were the expert of what you went through. I mean, that was your story.
Right.
And you learned so much from that story, where you've created something that people, like, this is such an invaluable thing for everyone to have. And by the way, I wholeheartedly, I want to hold it up again, and I wholeheartedly agree that everyone really needs to go out and get this book for themselves.
Yeah, it's when they tell you, I never started out as a writer. I never had an intention to be a writer or an author, because then they will teach you to, niche it down to your focus audience. That's impossible for this book, because you need it when you need it. And everybody is going to eventually need it. And so it's hard when the audience is everyone. Because when I do talks, Janice, the first thing I say is, how many people know someone who recently died or have a friend that's dealing with the death of someone they love, and hands go up? How many people are dealing with a friend who's going through a divorce? More hands go up. How many people have had a friend that recently lost their job? More hands go up. How many people have a friend that was just diagnosed with something that's, possibly fatal? And, everybody's hands are up now, right? And then the next question I ask is, now who knows what to do and say to offer comfort and support? And they all go down. Okay. So that's who I'm writing it for.
And, again, I felt the depth of what you were saying, because, we always talk in business terms, or even in our personal lives, about niching down the
Yes.
topic. And that must have been an overwhelming feeling when you really sat to write down your book, and as you were interviewing people along the way, but you captured it in such a way where, and by the way, I did not take it that, as you were pointing out, it wasn't as meant to say that people are doing something wrong or
Right.
doing it the wrong way. It was only to provide tools and strategies. and different things that you experience and that the people that you interviewed experienced as well. It's really, it's really a guide. And chapter 1, for instance, which I absolutely love, and I didn't think about it in different terms. Because, for instance, I remember when my dad passed away, and, of course, everything is overwhelming when you lose someone. We know that. But for instance, you had mentioned email, sending someone an email. And of course, for quite a while, I didn't check my spam or junk folder, and there were condolences in my junk email. I love what you pointed out to someone, that it was so nice that they reached out to me. I love that they took the time to extend their condolences. But what you had mentioned about, sending a card. And, I am from that respectable age bracket where, good, bad, and different. And especially times when you need those comforting words and prayers, that you receive a card, which, excuse me, which means the world to someone going through such a bad time.
It's tangible.
Mhm.
See, I had a gentleman make me a memory box when my son died. And that's where my son only lived 29 days. So he didn't have a lot of, I don't have a lot of physical things to remember him. I don't have his favorite this or that, because he didn't have those. So that's all I have, are those cards, those condolences, those very few pictures. And those are those tangible things that we need to help us heal when we're having a bad day, to go back for that reassurance that's that. And so I think that's something that's lost. It's, I guess I could go back and check emails, but that's just not the same. It truly isn't. And I would hope that the, younger generations have still grown up with things of comfort, a blanket or a stuffed animal. That's what those things provide to those grieving, those tangible physical things that either you send, that they can go back to for comfort when they need them at a later time.
And that is so important, because, looking back on those memories and reliving them in such a way, brings you so much comfort. And I think that having that comfort are the things that are going to get you through those tougher times.
Right. And if you can't provide that, jot down a note. It doesn't have to be a physical card. I know the younger generation, that's wasteful. They, it's filling the landfills, and I get that. But there is something to be said about something that you can get out, you can hold, that you can read, that you can attach to. We have, the younger generations still have, basements full of things as well. And so it's just a nice reminder. And if you want to save paper, at least share a story. That was one of the things when my father died a few years ago, 2 years ago. Those were precious gifts that people gave to us that we didn't know. My father, I knew my father growing up, but I didn't really, live with my father, follow his life as closely, when he retired and when he went back to work as an instructor at a community college. And so these young people were coming, I knew him as a welder in the steel mill. And then he recreated his life as an instructor at a technical college. And so at his funeral, these young men were coming up to us. I was expecting all of his buddies from the steel mill to come, but there were this great showing of young men that talked to us about how my dad truly influenced their life, helped them change their life, turn their life around, breathed hope and belief into them. That was a side of my dad that, I never knew. And so they gifted us with that blessing. And so when you have, even if it's a simple story that you think is insignificant, share that with those family members, because they're not going to have any more interactions with their father. So this is like a fresh perspective and a fresh conversation or something. It's something that they can treasure and hold on to, and that's a real gift.
It certainly is a gift. And I think again, it goes back to your book, and I love referring to this. And I had to take, as everybody knows, I love to use the stickies. I had to take a lot of them out because I couldn't see, I all over the place. But you mention in your book high tech and high touch.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking about the younger generation, they grew up with the technology. So it's not that they don't get it. That's what they know. That's what they grew up
Right.
with. And of course they would probably just automatically send something out via email or text messages, what have you. But again, to go back to receiving the card and how you took in those beautiful stories that your dad's coworkers shared with you. I mean, that is priceless.
It is. It is. And, I guess, if I were a griever and I was receiving emails, I would at least print them out so that you have them, so that you can pick them up and have something. High tech, honestly. When I wrote this book, I I still am a real proponent of high touch over high tech, but families are spread out all over the country. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then we had this thing called a pandemic, where there was no high touch. There was no touching at all. There was no gathering. And so all we had was technology to keep us in touch with one another. So I want to let people know, this book was written pre-COVID. It was written pre-pandemic, and its intention was, if at all costs, high touch over high tech. But high tech, we have seen, has been a lifesaver for many of us. It was the way we had to say goodbye to our loved ones. It was the way that we had to have memorial services for many people. It was the way that, we were able to get in touch and have a face-to-face conversation with someone without being physically present. So I still am a proponent of high touch over high tech, but we have seen where high tech, or where technology has provided us ways to reach out. And so, there's goodness and blessings in both.
Yes, and you pointed that out so perfectly, because thank God a lot of the families that were suffering and weren't able to be there with their loved one. And all those amazing nurses or caregivers, whoever who would bring in their laptops or whatever it be, that that loved
Or
ones.
FaceTime video, right?
Yes, that they were able to connect that way. Thank God we had it.
Right. Right.
Wow. In chapter 2, when you specifically talk about when a loved one dies, I know that in life, obviously life is unexpected.
Mhm.
We know that death happens. Sometimes we know in advance that it's imminent, but that doesn't make it any easier.
No.
And I think how you wrote that chapter was such insight on different things to help a loved one or to help a friend, and different things that you can do. What stands out to you the most when you look back at when you wrote your book and when you preparing that chapter? What in your mind stuck out to you the most, relating perhaps to your story, or maybe one of the people that you interviewed, what you took away from that?
Well, it all culminates at the end of the book into the two most important things. So I don't really want to give, that away, and we can address that, of course. But I think that it was ways that people showed up for you. And I remember one incident where I had a girlfriend that was truly, truly, truly afraid of hospitals. I mean, she just had like very, very, like almost anxiety attacks from going to a hospital. And after my son, I had a C-section, and so I was not allowed to drive. And he was transported to a hospital that was an hour away from where I lived. And so my husband and I and my parents and his parents were all taking shifts to be with my son, but I could not drive myself there for the first 2 weeks. And so she said, what can I help you with? And I knew what I was asking was going to be huge, but I was just asking her to take me to the hospital. I wasn't asking her to go into the hospital with me, but she did. She didn't make it about her and her fears. She made it about me and my comfort and what I needed and our friendship. And she came into the neonatal intensive care unit, which is probably one of the, like if the hospitals give you the heebie-jeebies, imagine an intensive care unit filled with babies like that. If that doesn't, make you feel anxious and make you a nervous wreck, I don't know what will. And she did that for me. So that was really important. So that I would think that was, one of those things where I really saw that someone sacrificed the true depth of our friendship, and said, it doesn't, it's not about me, it's about her and what she needs. So that was probably one of the things that stood out to me the most, in my personal situation. But what I would hear from people is just that they were surprised by some of the people who showed up for them. Like, their angels on earth were not always the people they thought they would be. They could have been total strangers or acquaintances who suddenly become instrumental in their healing process. And usually it's because that person has been in their shoes before and has stepped forward and said, I'm going to help you because I know how difficult this is and I know how this feels.
And the difficult aspect of it, there's so many, I think difficulty is almost like an umbrella, and there's just so many things underneath it. And when you're going through such a traumatic experience, and for your friend to step up in such a beautiful manner, I mean,
it make no difference. I've been through my talks, I have talked with people, and people have I will do this for you, and then they back out. And so, follow through. Don't say you're going to do something and then don't follow through on it, because that will sever a relationship too. So yes, she was very selfless in that, but she could have backed out at the last minute. She didn't. But I have talked with people who have had that happen to them, and then they're crushed, absolutely crushed.
I just can't even imagine. And to ask the question why or if, I mean, we all know that in certain terms that we don't know what somebody else is going through, but
Right.
when outwardly say, hey, I'm going to do this for you, and not follow through with it, that is beyond devastating.
Yes, absolutely. But I would say that those are infrequent things, but just that's why, and I'm jumping ahead in the book, but I have a section on what's not so helpful. And I don't want to say right or wrong, I want to say what's helpful and what's not so helpful. And so one of the phrases that I still have to stop myself from saying, that all of us say, it's these cliches that we cling to. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. A lot of people mean that. But there's a couple of things that are how you can do that better. First of all, you're putting it back on the griever or the person that you want to help to come up with the solution for what you should do. And I always tell people, when you're new in grief or when you're suffering trauma or some kind of bad news, the world just kind of becomes foggy. You don't know what day it is. You don't know what time it is. You don't know what you need, what you don't need. You're in survival mode. And so to put that on someone to say, let me know what you need, like they don't even know. They don't even know. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's from talking to audiences again, and this is not when I started writing it, but many people feel that that is a very disingenuous phrase, that people just say that when they really don't want to do anything, but they want to sound like they're compassionate, which I never even thought, because I know that I have said it and I truly meant, if there's anything I could do to ease your burden, ease your pain, ease your suffering, I would do it for you, right? Because that was my intention, but not everyone has that intention, and which I have come to learn. But the other thing is that people will promise things and then they'll back out. And if there's anything that I can do, hey, do you need me to, this? And then when grievers will never ask you, most likely grievers will never ask you. Okay. So if they do draw up the courage to ask you, it means they really, really need it. And I had one lady tell me that, her husband died and her aunt had said, if there's anything you need, sweetheart, you just call me and I will do it. She said, my car broke down, it was raining, and I needed to be at work in 20 minutes. And so I finally, like my aunt said, if there's anything you need, and I called her and she told me, The Price is Right is on. I never miss The Price is Right. I can't take you. And she said, I've never spoken to that aunt again. So what I'm saying is that someday someone might actually have to dig deep inside of them to come up and have that ask. And better be prepared. So why I say a better way to say it is to give 3 options of things you're willing to do. Willing to do. Okay. Can I come over and mow your grass? Can I walk your dog? Is there any phone calls you need me to make? Can I wash your laundry? Do you need meals? I'm going to the grocery store. Offer 3 things that you're willing to do. Not things you're not willing. If you don't know how to mow grass, then don't offer unless you're going to send a service over. So offer things that you're willing to do. And then if they say, no, not right now, call back in 2 weeks and offer again. And especially this is true for people that have traditional roles inside the family. The woman might not even know what she needs. Like, I don't know that the grass even needs cut until it's 3 weeks later and it's this high. And I realized, oh my God, he always took care of that. Or the gentleman, whose wife dies and he runs out of underwear and realizes, I don't know how to run the washing machine. And there are people like that don't know. So what I'm saying is they don't know what they don't know right away. So call and offer it again.
And that is so true. And what I loved about that section is you really gave so many great strategies and tips on different things that people could potentially do. And what a beautiful way to help someone in need, your loved one or your friend, by that, even like you said, follow up with them in 2 weeks. May I bring over this meal to you tonight?
Can I add 2 things that I've from talking to many audiences, things that were really helpful and things that people might not think about? Someone said that someone offered, hey, listen, I know that when your spouse dies, like everything with your taxes change. If you want me to do your taxes for you this year, I can do your taxes for you to help you figure that all out. And another person was had a friend who was a medical coder. And she helped her sort out all the bills, the medical bills that were piling up because it was just too much for her to deal with. She just they're in the corner. I know where they are, but I can't deal with it now. And this woman, like, this is what she does for a living. And she went through those bills in an hour or two and saved that woman hours, months of turmoil that she took that off her plate. She took that huge thing off her plate. And to her, it was nothing. It was nothing, right? So we think that we don't have these gifts, talents, and abilities, but we do. We just have to think outside the box. You don't have to just send flowers to a funeral. You can help someone down the line with something that seems so insignificant to you to make the world of difference to them.
And that is so true. You know, there are so many gifts that we could give to a loved one or friend without it costing money, so to speak. Like, we already have those talents within ourselves. That is just such a wonderful way to help. And not only did she save her friend, or whatever the connection was, a lot of time, but also saved her a lot of stress and overwhelm.
Yes.
And, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I always want to make sure when I'm talking to other people that I include those, because those are not in the book, but I'm learning more. And that's why I have a notes section at the end of every chapter, so that when you hear things or you've talked to other people, you can write those down, because there are things that I hear that go, oh, I love that idea. I'm going to do that next time.
Right. And I love that, because it gives you that point, that opportunity to reflect and to write that information in there. And what a great way to refer back to it.
Right.
Wow. What the other thing that I loved about your book, it was, you gave different scenarios for different life events. And excuse me, when I read it, I thought, for instance, when I went through my divorce and how my family reacted, how the outside world reacted. And in so many instances, obviously, had wonderful support from my family, but sometimes our friends, especially if you have friends on each side, don't know how to support each side, so to speak. And it really touched my heart that you covered so many different subjects within your book, that this book, it was so relatable in so many different ways.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I give the credit to the people who opened their hearts and their life stories and their journeys, so that, collectively we can help others. I could not, I had some knowledge, but I really do. Those people had to open up a lot of, uncomfortable situations in their life so that we could all help others. But I think that it was so well worth it. I'm really proud of this book. I really think that it is helpful. It's, so many people, after they've gone through something in their life, if you've come out the other side in a healthy way, obviously you've learned something from it. And so that's what I tried to find. I've tried to find what those people have learned and what and what they could share, so that we could help others heal as well.
And so beautifully well said, Sherrie. I think we've only scratched the surface and such a great conversation. I want to ask you a very specific question.
Sure.
Is there another book on the horizon?
I don't know. I never, as I said earlier, I never really set out to be a writer. I felt I was called to do this. And I'm currently writing an ebook, but that's just really to help grieving people. It's called Graduating Grief, and it's just like 12 to 15 little lessons that I've learned, and of how to help you gauge to move through this journey of grief. But I don't really I see that just as a tool and as a resource to help people. I don't know that I see it as a book like this, but I don't know. I always try to let the spirit move me. And if I feel called to write it, then certainly I will obey and do that. But for now, I just am really proud of that book. And I think that its message is so important for everyone. And it keeps coming back that message needs to still be spread and shared. So I don't know, maybe a version 2, especially after the pandemic. Maybe, what do they say? It's, along the same lines or a theme. I don't know, but we'll see. It's not in the works. I'll just say that.
Well, definitely keep us posted. Sherrie, before we sign off, how can our viewers and listeners connect with you further?
SherrieDunlevy.com. That's SHERRIE Dunlevy, DUNLEVY.com, or graduatinggrief.com. And I'm on social media at all those places, Sherrie Dunlevy, and at graduatinggrief.com. And I have the Graduating Grief podcast. I truly want people to live with passion, purpose, so they can make an impact, because my son, even though he died 23 years ago, I feel his life and his life story is still making an impact on people today.
No doubt he truly is, Sherrie. Thank you for sharing your passion and purpose.
Well, thank you, James.
You're welcome. How can I help? Your go-to guide for helping loved ones through life's difficulties. Sherrie, thank you so much for being here today on the Stories podcast.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. My pleasure as well. Remember, if you have a story to share, you have passion and purpose, that inspiration needs to come out and to be shared. I am truly inspired by my guest today, Sherrie Dunlevy. Thank you so much, everyone, and come back and visit us again real soon. Thank you.